Let me show you the only two scales you could ever possibly need to start soloing and improvising on the fly right now. And even if you learn nothing more than these two scales, I guarantee you'll be able to play most of what you need to play on your guitar. Now, before we dive into the lesson, make sure you stick around to the very end because I have a free gift for you that you're gonna love. Okay, now let's get into it. What are these two scales? These two scales are the minor pentatonic scale and the major pentatonic scale. And today we're gonna talk about how to combine them seamlessly so you can have endless ideas when you're soloing and improvising. So let's get started with the minor pentatonic. Now we're going to be in the key of E today, so we're going to start with the E minor pentatonic. Now the starting note is this note right here, which is the 12th fret on your guitar. This note is an E note, also known as a root note, which is a key detail we'll get into in a little bit. So we start with the 12th fret, first finger, then we're going to play the 15th fret, and you can use your pinky or your third finger. I like to use my pinky because I like to approach playing like I coordinate a finger to a fret, you know. So if I'm in a position like this, using my first finger at this one fret, and then I have, 3 frets up, I'll just go 3 fingers up and use my pinky. All right, then we're gonna play 12 and 14 on the A string, 12 and 14 on the D string, 12 and 14 on the G string, 12 and 15 on the B string. So using our first finger and pinky again, and then 12 and 15 on the high E string. And there is our minor pentatonic scale in the key of E. So we're gonna start with finding those root notes real quick. So you know how we had our first one, which is 12th fret right here on the low E string? There's actually 2 more root notes that we have to work with. The other one is right here on the 14th fret of the D string. And then the last one is on the 12th fret of the high E string. So as you navigate through this scale, you have 3 E notes or root notes, right? Now the reason those are important is because in the key of E, right, the note E, right, is obviously the best note you can play because it is the note reflecting the actual key. So you can think of it this way. If you're in the key of E and you play an E note, you will never play a wrong note, right? So it's kind of a good safety net to keep in mind. Now all the other notes in the scale are kind of a context that move around the root notes. You can think of it that way. So because this is a minor pentatonic scale, there are certain notes in it that reflect a minor tonality, right? But we still have those root notes. So if we're going through the scale, it kind of takes on a more musical kind of vibe when we play it deliberately like that, where we're emphasizing on those, those root notes. So we do want to navigate our way through the scale, not just robotically or mechanically, right? Because that's not really playing music, that's just exercising a scale. But as you're going through it, if you start to kind of emphasize those root notes, you can start to develop more musical ideas because you're thinking in the context, right, of how this scale is played. And that's how you start to form phrases and stuff like that when you're improvising. Now let's move on to the major pentatonic scale. We're still in the key of E, obviously. Now here's the cool trick, right? Anytime you're playing a minor pentatonic scale pattern, right, and you want to find the major pentatonic scale pattern on the fly, this is all you have to do, okay? You're going to essentially, let's say we're right here, right, starting on that root note. We're going to just bring it down 3 frets, 1, 2, 3, and we're going to play that exact same pattern or that same box, right, only with these new frets. Now, if we take this pattern here that we just went through, right, and then we shift it down 3 frets. Remember, you want to shift it down 3 frets from the minor. That's how we reach major pentatonic territory. So check this out. Starting with the 9th fret here on the low E string, then we play with our pinky the 12th fret, right, which is the root note. So these scales obviously are going to share that E root note because they're both in the key of E. All right, then we have 9th fret, we have 9 and 11 on the A string, 9, 11 on the D string, 9 and 11 on the G string, 9, 12 on the B string, and then 9, 12 on the high E string. So same exact pattern, same exact box, however you want to think of it, right? Our fingers are going in that same movement, right? We've just shifted it down 3 frets. So anytime you want to find the major pentatonic equivalent to the minor pentatonic that you're playing, all you have to do is take that minor pentatonic pattern, shift it down 3 frets, and then play it through the same way, and you found yourself the major pentatonic scale. Now let's talk real quick about the root notes in the major pentatonic scale. So we have that 12th fret on low E. That's a shared E note, right? And then as we continue to walk up the scale, right here is the next E note, which isn't shared. I mean, it is and it isn't. I'll show you in a second. It isn't shared by the minor pentatonic in terms of its exact positioning, right? But this note right here, the 9th fret of the G string, is another E note. But it's actually the same note that you find here back on the minor pentatonic on the 14th fret of the D string. Same note, different position. Okay, so check it out. Same exact note. So that's E in the same octave, just in a different position on your fretboard. That's all you have to really think about with that. And then as we continue up the scale, then we reach that other 3rd root note, that E note on the 12th fret of the high E string. So we can find 3 E notes in each of the minor and major pentatonic scale positions. So same idea like we talked about with the minor scale, minor pentatonic scale, is think of the context, right? It's sharing the same root notes, it's in the same key. The difference are all the other notes around it in that context give it its tonality, right? So if we were to emphasize the root notes on the major pentatonic scale as we walk up, we'll kind of hear it, right? Right? Usually with the major pentatonic, you really want to land on an E note, right? Because that way you continue to keep that tonality in your mind, right? So you don't necessarily want to end on the first note of the scale, right? In this case, which is the 9th fret of the low E string, right? So you want to just come back to, just to continue to set that major pentatonic tonality in your head, you want to come back to that root note. So I like to end a major pentatonic run, right back on that root note on the low E string. And hey, if you're enjoying this lesson so far, be sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to our YouTube channel so you can be the first to watch new lessons and maximize your guitar playing gains every time you sit down with your guitar. All right, now that we're acquainted with these 2 scales, let's talk about ways that we can use them to make some actual music. All right, so personally, I love starting off when I'm switching back and forth between those 2 scales. I like starting with the major pentatonic. Now, this is the way that I personally approach these 2 scales. I think of the major pentatonic as a great resource for melody, right? Thinking of lines that sound like something someone would sing, right? And I love the minor pentatonic as just a lick factory, right? You can come up with cool licks, and of course you can get all those bluesy and like rock and roll kind of sounds out of it. And so when I want to sort of move into that space with what I'm playing, I'll move on to the minor pentatonic, but if I want to go back to being melodic and kind of pretty and a little more lyrical, I'll focus on the major pentatonic. So let me give you a little demonstration. So since we're in the key of E, we can totally just drone a low E string and just let that ring while we play through the scale. So like I said, I like to start with major pentatonic because it can get a little lyrical, right? I can do something like this, Real simple, right? All I'm doing is I'm just kind of sliding, I'm ramping up a little bit to what eventually just ends up being playing a root note. All right? Now here's the thing, this note I'm sliding to, which is the 11th fret of the D string here, that note's very important, even though it's such a passing, almost afterthought of a note, because it's establishing the context of us being in the major pentatonic. Now, if I were to do this, if I were to omit that note and just play, open low E, and then just play that note, that E note on the 9th fret of the G string, then it's a bit more ambiguous. You don't really know if I'm major or minor in my context, but if I play this note, right, you can really hear the context, like, ooh, this is sounding very, joyful, right? If you want to get those joyful sounds, major pentatonic is a great way to do it. So just by doing something as simple as droning a low E string, sliding up to the 11th fret of the D string, and then just playing that E note right there, 9th fret of the G string. right? And as far as sliding up to the 11th fret here on the D string, doesn't matter where you're sliding up. You know, you can slide up from the 9th fret or you can slide up from the 4th fret. Doesn't matter, right? However you do it, it's really just, you can almost think of it as just like an effect, right? We're creating some drama here, right? Just with that slide, or glissando is the musical term, right? So just with something like that, you can sit and play that and you're onto something musically, right? We're not playing a lick. We're not exercising a scale. This is music right here. Very simple, just raw music. So that's an example of just contextually making my way just to home base, right? The root note. Now, if I were to use one of the other root notes, let's say, right? So that was a little bit more notey, right? But I was still focusing on that high E, 12th fret, right? That E note right there, I was always coming back to it. And every other note I was playing around it was staying within that major pentatonic musical context or tonality, right? And then right there what I did, and by the way, these are all off the cuff ideas just from all the time I've spent just, you know, really getting to know how these notes feel, right? And how they sound. I was deciding, okay, I'm gonna walk from this one to this one, right? Walk from E to E. But what I did was just, you know, instead of just mechanically, you know, I try to just make it a little bit more musical, a little bit more on purpose, you know? So when you do it that way, you know, when you kind of, you know, add some flair to it, like I was doing just some hammer-ons and pull-offs and just also repeated notes, but pretty much I was just focusing on those notes right there in the scale, right? And then let's just say we want to come back to the low E note here, right? So we can do something like this. Right? Same thing. I'm trying to keep it as, you know, straightforward as possible in terms of not deviating from the actual scale, but also not trying to be too flashy or anything like that. Just literally using the notes that we are given, right, with the scale. And just thinking in terms of dynamics and that kind of thing, you know. And this is what I'm talking about. When you're sitting with your guitar and you have the tools, you have like the framework of a scale that you got to follow, right? In the beginning, if it's required of you based on your skill level to just mechanically walk up and down the scale, that's okay. Because in the beginning, that's okay because you're getting it under your fingers. You're getting acquainted, you're building the muscle memory, all that kind of stuff, right? But once that's established, what you don't want is to be stuck in that habit of just playing the scale up and down. So if you're ever in a situation where you're jamming with someone or if you're playing to a backing track, what you don't want to do is just... You don't want to do that because that's not really music. You know, this is just your fingers just doing their thing that you train them to do. So be cautious about that, right? Learn the scale, get it under your fingers, and then once you're comfortable enough playing it, then you can start to take more creative liberties. And I'm telling you, even if it's just starting with one root note at a time and picking a handful of other notes, working your way around it, you know, all the time that you spend doing that is only going to add and feed that inner creativity that even if you don't even realize it, when you're on the spot and you're improvising, you know, those ideas will just come out. I'm telling you, it happens to me to this day, you know, where ideas where I don't even really, it's not like I plan them and they just come out and I'm like, how did I come up with that? Then I think back like, man, I know there was a time where I sort of worked out that idea just by sitting with my guitar and playing it. So that's really the, you know, that's the whole idea that I'm trying to impress upon you with practicing these scales. So that's kind of familiar with major pentatonic. So we've gotten into just playing beautiful melodies, right? Very, very limited amount of notes to work with. You know, now if we move to minor pentatonic, like I said, this is where I like to get more licky with it, right? I like to, you know, think more in terms of like the sounds I love to hear from a minor pentatonic scale. Stuff like that, you know, it's just very bluesy. So now that we're in minor pentatonic territory, okay? You want to approach it the same way, okay? Start simple, right? And focus on those root notes. So if we're going to start with the 12th fret on the low E string here, right? And just pick a handful of notes. Let's just do like the top part of the scale, right? So just 12, 15 on low E and then 12, 14 on A. So these 4 notes. Let's start with just those for now, right? Right? There's a lot of ideas you can come up with just with those 4 notes, you know? And if we wanted to walk it over to the next E note, which is 14th fret of the D string, right? Right, but we're always landing back to home base, right? To those root notes. Right? So even if you were to kind of get notey with it, as long as you focus on that objective of just landing on that root note, right? And then moving on to the next E, right? The final one, which is 12th fret on high E. We can just keep it going, you know? And then next thing you know, we're just walking our way, you know, across those 3 E notes in the context of the minor pentatonic scale, right? Now, again, you don't have to get really licky with it, but just start getting licky with it, right? I'm gonna make that a thing. Let's put that on a t-shirt. So if we were to start with, you know, just playing notes around the root notes, right? And again, if you hearken back to the blues, it's all about simplicity, right? It's all about simple expression. You could do something like this, right? Which all I'm doing is just taking that 15th fret on the high E string, giving slight bends, what are known as blues bends, right? And then coming right back. That's a phrase right there. That's something that someone could sing, like a good blues singer could sing something like that. Right? And a good blues guitar player plays something like that. You can do the same thing on the B string if you want, you know. The whole point is to just take these notes, right, memorize them, and then start to find ways to manipulate them through the context of your personal style. That even if it's something you're developing, right, it's just, you don't want to be, you know, don't be afraid of it, right? You know, you can just do that anywhere, right? These are 2 note per string scales, you know, so you can mirror certain patterns and stuff. You can even do the same pattern, like you can do like, and do that in the major pentatonic. Same basic idea, right? But I just shifted it down to the major pentatonic and the context changed, even though everything I played as far as what my fingers were doing were the same. Is this all making sense? This is how I want you to approach actually using these scales, because there's a difference between learning a scale and using it, or using it properly, if you want to say. Let me tell you, one of the best, most important pieces of advice I've gotten when it comes to improvisation, that I'm going to share with you right now, is that the difference between using, right, a scale and just knowing a scale comes from here. It's a mental game, right? It's not just a physical game. There's 2 factors at play here. There's your mind, right? And then there's your hands. And you want to have a clear communication between the 2. You want to come up with an idea in your head and let your fingers bring it to life, right? That is what you want to focus on when it comes to improvisation. So that's why I'm saying use the scales in a way that's musical, that's deliberate. Think of the context, right, of these scales. And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what key you're playing in, you can just use major and minor pentatonic and play virtually everything you possibly could need to play just with those 2 scales. All right, so you've just discovered the 2 most important scales for any guitar player. And hopefully now you have a good understanding of how to use these scales to get you started with soloing. And now it's time for your free gift. So hopefully you've been following along with me and you've got these 2 scales embedded in your mind. But chances are when you take what you learned today and you put it into practice, like playing to a song or to a backing track, you might get a little lost. And that's okay, because I've got something for you today that's guaranteed to help you out with that. It's a free cheat sheet that's going to show you how to instantly solo in any key. This has helped thousands of guitar players bridge the gap between learning scales and understanding how to use them in a solo anywhere on the fretboard. I believe every guitar should have this, and that's why it's yours 100% free. So click the link here or check the link in the description box to grab yourself a copy. I want to thank you for hanging out with me today. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. I'm Eddie with Guitar Mastery Method, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.